Hamilton, a spectacular musical, but one which takes its central character, has them cheat on their wife for an extended period, and then tells you, don't worry about that. Lin-Manuel Miranda manages to craft this narrative persuasively enough that you don't necessarily leave a viewing feeling dirty. But how is this achieved?
Before we get into this, we do want to acknowledge that we are talking about the narrative told within the musical and ignoring the real history that might be behind it. Our interest is with how the story is told to the audience purely within the play.
The first point is fairly obvious. Hamilton is the main character, the eponymous star of the show, so why wouldn't we support him through the full narrative? By the time he gets around to cheating on his wife, we've already sided with him through the full first half as he goes from scrappy underdog to Secretary of the Treasury.
But how much of that first half is stealthily laying the groundwork for excusing his later infidelity? From early on, Hamilton is compared to a feral tomcat.
A comparison that he seems to exult in.
That's true.
And he does little to rebuke his friend's characterization of his marriage as a lack of freedom.
Raise a glass to freedom.
Hey, something you will never see again.
The songs Helpless and Satisfied do a lot to set up why Hamilton might justifiably act the way that he does. We are told that he will never be satisfied, with Angelica later casting his sleeping with Mariah Reynolds as a continuation of a quest for unattainable satisfaction in the Reynolds pamphlet.
You can never be satisfied, but I hope you're satisfied.
This tries to divert the blame from Hamilton in three harmful ways. It casts the cheating as part of Hamilton's, or potentially all men's, nature to be excused as unavoidable.
It suggests that it's partially Angelica's fault as she sized him up so quickly, and that if not for her intelligence on the matter, they might have gotten married and he would have been satisfied enough to not cheat.
It also implies that some blame lies with Eliza for not being as interesting or as smart as Angelica.
She's set up as just not as satisfying of a partner for Hamilton.
This is a refrain that we see echoed throughout, as Eliza is held up as a loving, but nagging wife who wishes her husband to abandon the war, politics, and general quest for a legacy, and instead spend time with his family.
Angelica, on the other hand, seems to hold his heart, as notable in the grammatical highlight of the piece, questioning the phrase, "my dearest Angelica."
My dearest Angelica, with the comma after dearest.
Furthermore, we see that Angelica seems to have a stronger respect for Hamilton's work than Eliza does. During Take a Break, she acknowledges, "I know you're very busy, I know your work's important," before imploring him to come away with them.
And that scene leads into the next strategy to make Hamilton's decision read as acceptable to the audience. We see Hamilton's great show of willpower in turning down a vacation because he's so committed to his political cause and making America strong.
First, Eliza approaches him about coming away so they can spend some time together. Then both Eliza and Angelica invite him in a way that, after earlier harem comments, suggests a certain nature to what he might be turning down. But with great virtue, Hamilton rejects his family for the good of his country and his career.
And instead accepts the advances of one Mariah Reynolds.
Now, we might pause here to question how reliable our narrator is intended to be. The role of narrator for the majority of the play lies with Burr, Hamilton's rival, and Angelica is one of the only other characters who's allowed to break the fourth wall.
Burr introduces us to the story at the beginning of the musical, provides regular summaries of what we're about to see, and speaks directly to the audience to explain his own motivation in songs like The Room Where It Happens and The World Was Wide Enough. But that is not the case here. Here, Burr sets up the basic scene and then passes the story over to Hamilton to explain.
I'll let him tell it.
And Hamilton does exactly that. And we have to assume that within the story, he's going to cast himself in the best possible light. And it still doesn't look great. He opens with an explanation that he was really tired and in need of a break, asking us to take pity on him by reminding us that he is a bastard orphan.
Now, his explanation that he needs a break from his hard work in politics actually plays into a real phenomenon called decision fatigue. When you view willpower as exhaustible, which many people do, the more virtuous you've been recently, the harder it is to keep holding yourself to a high standard. If you feel that you've been good, it's significantly easier to justify a weak decision, like breaking down and grabbing fast food on your way home from the gym, instead of eating that salad or skinless chicken breast that you have in the fridge.
In Say No to This, Hamilton is showing us that he's had to turn down appealing offers for a vacation and has been running himself ragged with his efforts to get his plan through Congress. The show has previously made it clear that he will probably lose his job if he doesn't succeed, and that he believes his success in this to be critical to the future of the country as a whole. These details serve to make the audience well aware of both the pressure he is under and the scope of his virtuousness. So, when temptation comes a-knocking, we're meant to understand that he had little willpower left and had a slip in judgment.
Look, first of all, it's not like you tripped and fell into her, and then out of her, and then into her again.
The fact that this is perhaps the best argument for his actions being understandable isn't a good look, and we'll come back to how even that point breaks down in a minute.
So what does that temptation look like when it does knock at his door? Hamilton presents Maria Reynolds as a woman in need, down on her luck, and requiring some assistance. A position we can imagine he relates to given his own origin story. This allows his initial actions to be seen as those of a selfless Good Samaritan and casts Reynolds as the seductress.
We should probably be skeptical of this, though, given who's telling the story and the power differential between the Secretary of the Treasury and a woman in need, especially in this historical setting. It's certainly cause for alarm when questioning the tale's validity. But let's just for a moment assume that Hamilton, a character cast as being very persuasive and good with words, is telling the whole truth about this story.
I wrote my way out.
If that's the case, we still run into another issue with the next part of the story in that
It goes on for several months.
Wow.
Perhaps we can accept Hamilton's version of events, where he is being cunningly seduced by Reynolds one night, and if that is all that happened, it may be more easily forgivable, but in the song Say No to This, Hamilton tells us he had been seeing Reynolds for a month. And in the Reynolds pamphlet, we find out the affair went on for multiple months, even after a blackmail threat.
Which brings us back to our earlier point about decision fatigue. It might be a believable explanation for his momentary lapse in judgment for a specific situation when he was stretched thin, but it breaks down when we're discussing lapses in judgment that happened on a regular basis across a period of months.
So, when we find out that Maria Reynolds' husband James wishes to extort Hamilton, what are we asked to think? Hamilton is shocked and outraged and rushes to Maria, threatening to cut her face? A threat that was historically made against sex workers as a threat to their livelihood, and he interrogates her about whether she was involved in the scheme, something that we never get a clear answer to, and he eventually decides to pay James Reynolds the blackmail money to keep him quiet while continuing his affair.
Hamilton asks the audience to doubt Maria's motives and character, while the tone and costuming of James suggests that although the audience might not approve of the affair, it should be understood that Hamilton's the victim of opportunists and not entirely to blame for his situation. A well-crafted notion, if not a convincing one.
It's worth noting as a counterpoint to the idea of Maria being involved in the con that an interesting choice is made in the opening number. There are 3 women that sing the line "I loved him" regarding Hamilton. Eliza, Angelica, and the actress that plays both Peggy, the third Schuyler sister, and Maria Reynolds. She is dressed in a nondescript white, which makes it unclear which character she is representing, and could be thought to be Peggy talking of a sisterly love. But in the booklet that accompanies the soundtrack, the line is attributed to Maria. If we take this song that tells the narrative in direct terms to be true beyond question, then it would suggest that Maria had real feelings for Hamilton and was as much a victim of James's scheme as Hamilton was.
As a side note, this device in the opening number goes one step further. For each of the actors that have I lines and play more than one character, their line works for both characters. Lafayette and Jefferson, Mulligan and Madison can all be said to have fought with Hamilton in different ways. Lawrence and Philip can both be said to have died for him, and both Peggy and Maria can be said to have loved him.
Moving to the next part of this sordid story, when Burr, Jefferson, and Madison seek to dig up dirt on Hamilton and come across the payments to Reynolds, they think they have found evidence of illegal speculation with government funds that would be tantamount to treason. When confronted, Hamilton presents evidence of the affair as a way to clear his character of the other charges.
The framing of this works to suggest that Hamilton is beyond reproach in all other situations, and the affair is the only stain on his character, building his image up to the audience in a subtle way to imply that he's otherwise a good man and therefore should be given the benefit of the doubt.
We're shown that Hamilton recognizes that this is not a problem that will go away and fears that Burr might expose the affair at a later date when it is most convenient to him. Interestingly, unlike with Maria Reynolds, Hamilton does not seem angry at this, but rather resolute about what he must do. Throughout all of the attempts to clear Hamilton's character, the blame seems to be shifted from one person to another, but only ever to the women. Angelica, Eliza, and Maria all receive some portion of the blame, while James Reynolds, Burr, Jefferson, and Madison are all left in the clear, and their actions are signalled as the inevitable outcome of Hamilton's own actions and as reasonable actions to take in the pursuit of their own political ambitions.
The song Hurricane serves to let Hamilton explain his impending actions by revisiting the mechanics used earlier in the play to make his actions seem more forgivable. We hear once again about his tragic childhood, and the staging works to lay more blame at Maria's feet by having her be the one that literally hands him the pen to write the Reynolds pamphlet with.
The writing of the pamphlet is shown as a brave and decisive action. We do love a decisive hero to get behind, and Hamilton seems to be risking his personal reputation to keep working for the good of the country. Getting out ahead of the rumours also seems like a good idea, a way to have some control over what is clearly inevitable.
However, the way Hamilton does this is particularly selfish and even cruel as it's depicted. The Reynolds pamphlet not only damages Hamilton's own reputation, but also that of his family, and it's strongly implied that Eliza might only find out about the affair from the pamphlet, along with everybody else. On top of this, the wholly unnecessary details included, like that he slept with his mistress in his own house while his wife and kids were visiting his in-laws, only serves to rub salt in the wounds.
His poor wife.
What follows is the finishing touches of a narrative device that asks us to feel sorry for Hamilton rather than criticise his infidelity. Hamilton loses his shot at the presidency, his wife separates from him and burns his letters, striking at the legacy that we know is so important to him, and his son dies in a duel in an effort to defend Hamilton's honour.
This sequence is written as a tragedy, and certainly aspects of it are extremely sad and devastating to our eponymous character. Eliza's father's words to Hamilton, "Be true," seem in a repeat viewing to be a dramatic warning of an unavoidable tragedy. But what is obscured by these songs is that this was a self-inflicted tragedy.
While we feel sympathy for the man who has lost his career and his family, when in Quiet Uptown the line, "Forgiveness, can you imagine," is delivered by the chorus, there's certainly a part of my brain that calls out, no, not really. To be fair, the forgiveness by Eliza, and presumably Angelica as well, given the closing of the musical, might be more believable in the historical time frame. However, in the play we get only 3 songs between the Reynolds pamphlet and Quiet Uptown, so it feels a little rushed to a resolution.
All of this works to tell a narrative of a rise, fall, and reprisal in a 2.5-hour musical in which the final legacy provided about Alexander Hamilton can focus on his prowess as a politician while sweeping aside his less than stellar personal life.
The musical delivers a finely crafted narrative that looks perfectly reasonable on the surface, but begins to crumble under direct scrutiny. By providing Hamilton a protagonist shield against shame, casting as much of the blame as possible onto other characters, and supplying enough distracting tragedy that you feel sorry for him, Lin-Manuel Miranda manages to write Hamilton's way out of blame for his infidelity.
If you enjoyed this video on Hamilton, you can find the link to our full podcast episode about it in the notes below or wherever you find podcasts.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe to see more videos like this one.